Hello and welcome. My name is Kolby Van Camp.
And my name is Jesse Kaiser. Welcome to our podcast, Musically Inclined.
Musically Inclined is a program all about exploring music and the vast and interesting topics that surround it.
Whether that be discussing composing, music software, music history, or interviewing professionals, we've got you covered.
You can find us and stream us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever podcasts are found.
Special thanks to our podcast host program, Zencastr and Libsyn, for helping us make this happen. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kolby Van Camp.
And my name is Jesse Kaiser. Welcome to this very special episode of Musically Inclined.
Absolutely. We have our first guest here tonight, and I'm very excited to share with you this first guest. His name is Alex Wakim. And Alex and I don't know if we can say that we go way back, but we sort of do in a chronological type of way.
We literally do.
I mean, yeah. So what year did you graduate from K-State, Alex?
2018.
Okay, so I was a sophomore when you graduated. So spring of 2018.
Spring.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that was the end of my freshman year, and now I'm a senior. I have one more year at K-State. I'll be a super senior. But yeah. Oh my gosh, time flies. So Alex has done some really great stuff as of late. He got his bachelor's of music and composition at K-State. Is that correct?
I did.
Yes. And then you went on to NYU and you got your master's of music in composition. And that is awesome. I am very envious of that. So congratulations for that. That was a fairly recent development.
Yeah, I graduated in 2020. I was actually a pandemic grad from the film music program, or screen scoring is the official word now, from NYU.
Awesome. So you currently live in New York City. Is that how I understand it?
I do. I'm on 9th Avenue, 37th Street. I biked up 8th Avenue today, which is always a risky endeavor, but survived. I'm here.
Yeah. So I'm actually recording out of Garden City, Kansas right now. My dad is a physician, and he's actually working at the hospital here this week. And I said, you know what? We live in Topeka. So I said, you know what? I'll drive you out. It's a 5-hour drive. You don't need to be doing that. So yeah, I'm just chilling here in Garden City Community College. I was able to take my my Yeti microphone with me. And then Jesse's got his continuously awesome pad that he just chills at and does all his work from. So yeah. So Alex, we have our first segment that we do every week, and it's called the Composer's Corner. And essentially Jesse and I talk about music that we've listened to this week that we just found interesting. And it's kind of like, hey, for all of our listeners, we listened to this. We thought it was really interesting. We recommend you listen to it as well. And so with that, it's my turn to go first. We switch off every week. So this week I listened to, if you recall from our last episode, I talked a little bit about some music that I'm currently working on that has to do with the Holocaust, and the music that I've been listening to kind of work myself through that. There is a very prominent composer who was a Jewish Austrian individual, and he was gassed in 1944 in an Auschwitz gas chamber, and his name was Victor Ullmann, and he wrote an absolutely fantastic piano concerto that I adore it. And if you haven't listened to it, it's very cliched. I love the first movement. There's 4 movements, and I love the first movement. So I mean, go figure. But the first movement, you can literally hear the Gestapo coming to get him. It's very poignant. It's very very intense, and I loved it. I think it's a great piece of music. I definitely recommend listening to it. Victor Ullmann and his one and only piano concerto. I think it's number 25 or opus 25, something like that. So Jesse, hit us with what your composition is for this week.
Yeah, and I do want to say that Colby's been talking to me about Victor Ullmann and about that piece for quite a while, so I know it's a piece he enjoys, so it's kind of funny to hear him bring that piece up.
Guilty.
Yeah. So this week, I actually have not been listening to much classical music because ever since I finished my last piece that I was talking about, the Magnificat, last week, I've been kind of taking a bit of a break. So this week, I've been listening to a lot of EDM, as I like to. I've been listening to an album called Worlds by Porter Robinson. This album came out in 2013, I believe it was, and it was a pretty long awaited one. If you don't know about Porter Robinson, he's one of the biggest electronic music producers, DJs out there right now. He and when he started his career, he was making a lot of EDM, real bangers, that made him popular, because that's what was popular in the scene at that time, around 2010, 2012. But in 2013, when he made Worlds, he was really kind of branching out, making music that wasn't so much focused on that club scene, as it were, more music that was more authentic to himself, as he likes to put it. And I remember, as a little fledgling composer, being really excited for this album to come out, because I've enjoyed this guy's work for a long time. But I think he did an amazing job, especially considering the pressure that he faced from the community about what music they would like and what they wouldn't like. But I think he did a really great job. It's a pretty long album, but I always find myself coming back to it. So yeah, Worlds by Porter Robinson. It's an awesome album. I definitely recommend you check it out.
As someone who doesn't actively listen to EDM except when I'm with you, I'm gonna have to check that out, because I think I can unashamedly say that I really enjoy it, but it's just not anything that ever crosses my mental radar, when it's kind of like,
Right.
I'm going to open up Spotify. What kind of music am I going to listen to today? And it's kind of like, EDM is not even remotely on the list. But yeah, so be sure to check that out. Jesse always drops some great picks. So now, Alex, we're going to extend this part of Composer's Corner to you as well. So if there's any interesting music that you've been listening to this week, just feel free to hit us with it. We have an hour here on the show, and we've already gotten through 6 minutes, so we're trying to get through the Composer's Corner relatively quickly so that we can get to the more juicy stuff all about you. But yeah, I'd really love to know what you're listening to as of late.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, all sorts of stuff. Every day, it's always something completely different, and usually unrelated to, I don't know why, it's always unrelated to what I'm actually working on.
Sure.
Like if I'm working on like musical theater orchestrations for a film, a documentary, like I'm not listening to music theater. It's always so this week I had a really cool discovery. It's this Levantine Symphony No. 1 by Ibrahim Malouf. I know Ibrahim Malouf, he's a Lebanese trumpet player. I think he lives in Paris, but he actually came to K-State like before my time, way back when like Gary Mortensen was the head of the department. This was way back, and I wasn't there anyways. I mean, but I heard about it, and then I started listening to Ibrahim Malouf, and etc. So this was a really, really gorgeous album, Levantine Symphony No. 1, and it's like fusion, Middle Eastern. I mean, what Ibrahim does so amazingly is like really distills the whole spirit of the Middle East down to like a few notes. Like you can take all of the emotions of like Fairuz and Kulthum and like do it with this gorgeous, like amazing. It's really amazing trumpet playing. It's like nothing I've ever heard before, which is why people love this guy. Anyways, so that was my discovery of the week.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice.
So I'm definitely going to have to listen to that. So would you say that he kind of does like some minimalist work then, if he's able to like condense all of that down, or is that just more of his intellectual composer genius that he's able to take all these different styles and condense them down into one kind of genius melodic material?
Right. Oh, I mean, it's quite jazzy, right?
Oh, okay.
It's like fusion. It's fusion jazz, and I mean, if you're familiar with some of that Kulthum, like older 1950s Egyptian music, there's like one melody. It's like the melody is the thing, and then they keep repeating the melody. So getting that specific melody really right, that is what he does amazingly. But then it's like improv and rhythm and this and that, and there's like a choir in this, and it's very non-classical, like as we would imagine, like symphony.
Sure.
But I think it resonates really wonderfully in a minimal way, though.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I brought you on the show, Alex, because you have a very eclectic background, and you have a very eclectic style in which you've said, okay, I've mastered concert music, like we've all mastered, quote unquote. The air quotes are very big in this particular moment. We've mastered concert music as composers. Yeah, but then you've said, I I have all this Lebanese background, and I'm going to plug that into my concert music, and it's made some very interesting music. I remember some of the stuff that you were working on when you were at K State. I was very interested and intrigued by that because if you want to talk about family heritage, I'm like Belgian, German, and Irish with a little bit of
Right.
French in there. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything even remotely close to Lebanese, and I was never exposed to that music. I never really had a connection with that music, so it's really interesting to find a composer that's kind of like, hey, here's my concert music, here's my cultural heritage. I'm going to put those two together, and then bam, it's this really interesting amalgamation of styles. And so, but before I kind of like pick your brain about that, just give us a rundown of like who you are, where you're from, and like how you became a composer, kind of that general like small biography kind of thing that composers are
Oh.
always asked about.
All right, I need to pull out my bio now and read from it. No, um, great question. Um, okay, I was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas.
Nice.
So it was, which it always surprises people when they find out that there's actually a very large Lebanese community in Wichita, Kansas. It surprises me sometimes because it's just normal. But then when I realize that it's not that normal,
Sure.
it's
Right.
kind of. Um, so I grew up in this wonderful community. I'm thankful to have traveled a lot as a kid and gotten to be exposed to a lot of different cultures, and also this idea of like a huge Lebanese party was very normal to me. Like it's like, oh, there's all these people down dancing and shouting, and there's this music, and it's it was completely normal to me. So sometimes like I take a friend to a big party or something, and they're like, oh my god, this is normal.
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, we do this every week. Like what? So,
Yeah. Awesome.
so that's why the first you'll look at my bio on my website. Literally, the first thing I say is like growing up surrounded by Lebanese parties, etc. So, yeah, I also got exposed to a lot of other kinds of music, classical music, um, opera. I love classical music, opera, symphonic music, etc. So I was kind of exposed to these things. Also putting piano as a kid, and piano was kind of my into music. So I started really falling in love with um, piano, and then I wanted to learn Moonlight Sonata, and as like an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old or something, and my teacher wouldn't let me. She was like,
Oh.
"That's too hard. Like, you can't play Beethoven. You're too young," which she was probably right. But I was like determined to play all of it too. Um, so long story short, I like rebelled and learned it behind her back. But I was like practicing like a lot. Like the most I've ever practiced in my whole life was when I was 11. Isn't that kind of sad? Like I peaked my piano practicing at 11. Anyways.
I think that's the quintessential kind of like composer thing, though. It's kind of like
Mhm.
you hit 11, you're like, yeah, all right. And then you just kind of moved on. You said, I've arrived. That's it. That's all I need to know. I've learned everything. And then you went on to something different.
No, no, I kept, so I loved, I mean, piano is something I still keep with me. I still do the cocktail piano gigs here and there. I really love performing. But long story short, I learned that she wasn't happy. I got a new teacher. And then I started getting really intrigued by whose name is on this piece of paper. This piece of paper with music, and there's somebody's name on it. And I was like, I want to have my name on this paper.
Yeah.
So I started writing music, and I was like, I want to write symphonies and concertos. Like, I want to be like that kind of person. Um, and then I kind of had this film music seed though in my head. I was like, I kind of want to do film music. Like I would tell myself I want to do film music, but then that continued to grow, and the more I learned about composition, the more I loved it, especially film music. And that's how I got started with it. I say I got lucky though, because the more I learned about it, the more I loved it. Versus sometimes it goes the other way around. You learn what you actually have to do to be in a certain world, and
Yeah.
you don't like it. So that's
Sure.
that's the story.
That's great.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk about that, because that is kind of a thing when I was getting started composing, that I do realize, you're talking about, seeing that, piece of paper with the music and the guy's name on it. That's not something I really talk about when I talk about like how I got started with composing. But as I think back on it, it's super true. Like, I remember when I was a kid learning from piano method books and just thinking it was so cool that, these guys could have their names on this music that they wrote, and being like, man, yeah, I totally want to be that guy. That'd be so cool.
Yeah, kind of that, wanderlust, to just kind of be like, yeah, I'm looking at a piece of music. And it's interesting because our beginning piano experiences, Alex, were very similar, actually. Now that you've said that, I had a teacher. She's a wonderful lady. And I learned some music, and she was unhappy that I had learned said music, and it made me unhappy. And in turn, I went and found another piano teacher, and a wonderful lady named Dr. Sarah Higgins. And she, one day I was talking to her, and she was all about music theory, and I was kind of like, forget music theory, I'm going to go play Rachmaninoff. And so when you want to talk about music theory, I'll be back in about 10 years, and then we can talk about music theory. But I just remember one day I asked her, I said, you have a doctorate. Why aren't you teaching at a college? What's your doctorate in? She said, actually, so I did my undergrad in piano performance. Then I did my master's in music theory. Then I did my doctorate in composition. I'm actually, what I really do
Ooh,
is I'm a composer. And I was like,
there it is.
whoa, I didn't know that. And she was the first person that got me interested in composition. So, it's, I guess I owe everything to this other piano teacher, because if I hadn't become unhappy with what I was doing in her lessons, then I wouldn't have progressed on to where I am today. So it's kind of crazy how those little twists of fate, while in the moment they're rather painful, that it turns out into becoming something that's far beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. So yeah, I have written in my notes here, and I'm a moron, so it just makes me chuckle about it. But I wrote in, talk to Alex about moving from the Little Apple to the Big Apple. So the joke from people at Kansas State is that we're in Manhattan, Kansas, so it's the Little Apple. And the people in Manhattan are very proud. It's the Little Apple. But then Alex traded the Little Apple for the Big Apple. So I guess my question is, like, what was that experience like? Do you Are you a full-time composer? Like, do you make all of your money as a composer, or do you have, like, are you a barista somewhere and then at night you compose? Or like, what's it like to live in New York City, to go from Kansas to New York City, and just become a professional composer?
Right. Great question. Um, well, I actually wrote a piece for my senior recital. Wow, all of those words are words I never use, like piece and recital. Like I don't use those words anymore. But I wrote a piece for my senior recital, which is so weird saying that, called "Apple to Apple." It was really tacky, but kind of a cute. I mean, and like the cover had a little apple and a big apple and like an arrow. It was really very tacky, but um, you're yeah, it's like you're leaving this in college. People say college is the best time of your life. All the adults, they say that, right? College is like the best time of your life. Enjoy
Mhm.
it. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of true. I think it's kind of true.
Yeah.
Not that I would want to go back to college, but I recollect college very fondly.
Mhm.
And I think Manhattan, New York, is for people who never got over college. So, so it's like a grown-up college, right?
Yeah.
So, um, so okay, moving here was, I mean, it's like any move to New York. The city tries to kill you at all twists and turns of it.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's like I think I got delayed 12 hours, like 1 to 12 hours on my flight over because our airports in New York typically they consistently compete for worst in the nation. Like
Mm.
for delays and all the bad things, like consistently they're competing like and switching for worst. Um, you show up to like a really intense area of town. Everybody's looking at you. You have like these huge suitcases. I mean, it's kind of daunting moving
Mhm.
to New York. But I came for the NYU grad program,
Mhm.
so that was a really great kind of pivot into a legit professional life in music, which is um, quite wild, really.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
so going from Manhattan, Kansas to Manhattan, New York, I mean, I managed a lot of my expectations. Like things are going to be smaller. Keep your eyes out on the subway. Like all of these things were like in my mind when showing up. And I had a really fun apartment when I first moved. There's a pizza shop, Joe's Pizza. They're open till 4 in the morning. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, they're always, even during the curfew pandemic. I don't know how, but they were able to stay open till 4 a.m. always. So it was
Nice.
kind of nice. Like always had something to come home to. You're like right downstairs from my apartment. Um, and then the school was just an amazing NYU was an amazing experience, and like getting to know people, getting to know the craft of film music, getting to meet other people doing this like really wild thing. Like film music is completely wild to pursue. Like
Hmm.
when you look at the numbers, like it's completely insane for anybody to pursue this. But um, insanity is best enjoyed together, though. So
Sure.
Yeah.
uh, which is it's nice because you have people doing it's like a very specific thing that we're thinking about every single day, and you have a community of people who are thinking about that very specific thing. So I loved my time at NYU. So we have like actual New York, what being an actual New York is like, which I could talk about that for the whole hour. Getting into the doing the grad program, which was amazing, a really really amazing grad program, and then the hustling. I don't know if you want me to expand on one of those three, or if you have another question, or
Well, we have a bunch of other questions, but I think as an overview that works really well, and I think just in general, the culture shock to go from Kansas to New York is
Right.
huge. And then I'm sure I'm sure Jesse can speak to this. I'm sure to go from South Carolina to New York is a culture shock, and you live
Oh yeah.
in a fairly large city in South Carolina, but then to go from Kansas and Jesse, who's been to Kansas, I'm sure he can attest because I'll never forget when Jesse first came out to Kansas for the first time to visit me. We left Kansas City International Airport and we are driving on I-70 to go to Topeka, and he goes, "There's nothing." He said, "There's absolutely nothing." And I said, "Yeah, man, this is what's up. This is the life. There's absolutely nothing." And conversely, my my fondest memory. I've been to New York enough times that I don't ever want to go back. um,
oh really? Oh my
but
god, what did New York do to you?
well, I there's a lot of things. I got verbally assaulted by a dwarf on a subway once.
Oh,
That was
that
quite the
happens.
experience. I was a seventh grader. I didn't know what hit me.
Oh my god,
But no,
that happens.
I don't mind New York at all. And in fact,
Mm,
my fiance has never been to New York, and she's dying. She's like, "Please take me to New York." So
yeah.
I'll have to go to New York at some point.
You'll have to let me
Um,
know when you're here.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, for sure. I think my favorite memory though is a place called Fluffy's. I don't know if you've ever been to Fluffy's. I couldn't tell you where it was, but Fluffy's, and it's this little. I think it's like a Greek bistro, and
Mm,
I went there in seventh grade because a choir I was singing with went to Carnegie Hall. We sang in Carnegie Hall, and we went there on our first day, and there was this lovely older couple. They were the owners of this little bistro, and they said, "Oh, you're not from around here, obviously." And we said, "No, we're from Kansas, and we're here to sing at Carnegie Hall." They came to our Carnegie Hall performance,
Oh,
wow.
and they said, "You know what time's the performance? We're gonna be there." And then they were, and then they gave us a bunch of free stuff. We still have a mug in my parents' house that says
Dang.
Fluffy's in New York, and I'll never forget that. And it was kind of like, you hear all these crazy stories about these crazy New York people who are insane, who just they don't give a crap about you or anybody. And then there was this, just on the flip side of that coin, this older couple,
Yeah.
and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's so funny you talk about that because I do really line up with those experiences. I've been to New York City once. It was back when I was in high school. The orchestra was going on a trip to perform at a competition, and the competition was actually in New Jersey, but because we were so close, we were like, we have to go to Manhattan. So, um, and Colby was talking about the culture shock. It really is a culture shock. I've never experienced anything like it, and I haven't since. Um, but it's something I look back fondly on because even though it was a wild, crazy experience, whether it be, just having to push your way through Times Square, or whether it be this one guy, there was this homeless dude who was on who was like on the street corner in Times Square, and the sign that he was holding up, and you're gonna need to pardon my French, but this is what the sign said. It said, "I need money for weed, bitches," and and but I do, but at the same time, I what you're talking about, that kind of like flip side of like, people who don't care, and people who I think a lot of them are business owners, where they're really trying to make it, which I really commend, but and they're just so polite. So I feel like that, kind of flip side does really exist, where you have those two different kinds of people. It's like they're either really rude or they're really polite. um and but also, coming from the great hospitable South, it's something to get used to when people sometimes are just straight up rude to you, and you just need to kind of grin and bear it. um
Right.
but
But the great thing about New Yorkers is they're very honest. If
yes.
they're upset with you, they're gonna let you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, and what I found, I mean, New Yorkers are really some of the most like warm, kind people I've ever met, because we have the city humbling us every single day. Every single day I walk out of my apartment and I cross the street on Ninth Avenue, I almost get hit by a car. Every single day. Like because I live right on the tunnel to New Jersey, which if you want to talk about crazy people, we should talk about people in Jersey.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
well, I live right on the tunnel, 37th Street, turns onto Ninth Ave, right into the tunnel. And so, like, to get to that tunnel is like a bloodbath. Like, people are so angry. So, when I have the right of way, people are turning from 37th into the tunnel, and they're vicious. So, every
Oh
single
yeah.
day, I walk out and I'm like, thank God I made it across the street. Like, every day. Imagine that you walk out of your house and it's like, it's not like you walk, down out of the garage into your car. It's like, I'm walking into angry Jersey people. Like that's
Well, and the way that Jesse talked about that sign, it cracked me up because it's kind of like I can find that in Topeka. Just go over to Oakland, and man, I can find somebody who's looking for weed. Yo, like I can find that. So
Yeah.
that cracks me up. That it's kind of like you can find all of this stuff. Um,
find anything
I,
you want in New York, and it's a block away. It's not like you have to go downtown to find. You can literally walk one block, you'll find whatever, literally
Yeah.
anything.
yeah.
It was
So
crazy.
so to kind of go off of that, so we've talked, and I love it. This is why I love this podcast, because we kind of divert into one like sub topic from the topic that we were talking about, and it's organic and it's fun, and I love it. And to kind of expound upon kind of this culture shock. So I want to talk a little bit about how you implement your cultural heritage into your film music and your music theater. Specifically, I remember when you premiered American in Beirut at K State. There were people from my voice studio who sang in that, and I thought that was a really cool experience. I remember you came in and talked to our Intro to World Music class about it
Oh
with
yeah.
Dr. Hunt, and that was really fun. And I kind of want to ask you about that. I went on your website. I saw that you were on MTV Lebanon. Is that
Yeah.
correct? That's cool. Hey,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
It's
That
very
was
So
cool.
so
fun.
t- so talk to us for a few minutes about kind of American in Beirut and some of your film music that you're working on right now.
Sure. So I think it's so important as composers to be true to our story. I think it
Mhm.
gets really easy to be tied up with like what's cool now and what music sells and all of that, which it has a place, but I think the most important thing is being true to our story. And
Yeah.
so,
Mhm.
um, so my parents came over from Lebanon to the United States during the Lebanese Civil War, which was a 15 plus year conflict starting in 1975. And so they came over during that, and it's really a true American dream immigrant story. My dad went to school, like completely poor, had nothing, got his way through dental school, and then started a business and was able to provide for his family, etc. Uh, so I think there's something to honoring that heritage in a few different ways, but really getting to know the spirit of the Middle East and of Lebanon and of these people. And what I think most on my mind in college when I started writing an American in Beirut was how amazing these people are. I mean, they're really fascinating. Some of the most creative people you will ever meet are
Mhm.
Lebanese people. Um, And I think it has something to do with how they really have to survive in their country, like,
Hmm.
um, and also how they all know three languages. French was most of their first language. French, Arabic, and English. So they're thinking in three different languages all the time. So you have
Wow.
three different linguistic solutions to anything on your mind. And
Hmm.
anyways, so this idea of Lebanon and this idea of expressing it somehow and getting people to understand, look at these crazy Lebanese people, look at how interesting they are. That was my first goal. I know it wasn't very interesting, but that was my first
Hey, I
draft.
think that's awesome.
Thanks. Like, so, so I started writing an American in Beirut, and I realized that the best way to express this heritage was through the theater because it's a very theatrical community.
Mm.
So pretty much, I started working with a theater student, Jonah Kirkhart, really wonderful, talented writer, and we submitted to get this play, to get a really nice staged reading of the musical at K State, and it worked, which is kind of insane. I had no idea. It was one of those really random, like I was working on another project. I ended up in this theater talking to some guy, like random guy I'd never met before. And then I mentioned the musical, and he mentioned this application, and he said, "Oh, Jen would really like this." I was like, "Who's Jen? I have no idea any of these things." And so we applied. I met Jen, and we've been like best friends ever since. Well,
Wow.
I like to think
Yeah.
I'm best friends with Jen, but like I don't know what she would say, but
Sure.
uh, anyway, so that was the first draft, but and then it started to get a lot more complex. Like the second draft, I started to see a lot more, and I really understand the complexities of Lebanon because it's not just look at this crazy, fun, wild place. It's like look at all of this complexity. Look at like the obvious, what's the word? Contradictions, like right in front of everybody's faces, but that nobody can address, etc. And I was really frustrated by that. So I started to shift the version. I wrote version two. We performed it in 2019 in Wichita, Kansas, to fully sold out house the whole weekend. It was really nice, huge theater, um, and that was a bit more like Jen also directed that.
Nice.
It was a bit more honest of like there are complexities that we need to address, and I'm currently working on the third draft, but it's going to be a new title because we're wanting to explore kind of this immigrant mindset in the United States and being in the United States and maybe following a family experience the trauma, the epigenetic trauma through the generations and trying to find a way to make that universal to everybody. So that's where the musical is at this point in time. But it's also going to have to deal with the frustration because, I mean, look at Lebanon. It's so sad because it's such a broken country. Um, that their dollar has like, their Lebanese pound has lost 90% of its value.
Mm.
Wow.
What used to get you something for like 1,500 lira, you have to spend like 1,000, 15,000 lira, or something like that. It's like
Wow.
it's insane. It's so sad because these are the most creative people, but the government. I mean, there's so many factors that put them at risk, and so that's what's been on my soul. That's what's been on my mind, and that is what is driving this third draft.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really. I find it interesting, because one of the things I really appreciate about Middle Eastern and Eastern European culture um, is how how much music and especially dancing, like you were talking about earlier, is such a big part of the culture over there. And it's really something that I wish we did more of here in the US because
Right.
it's really obviously not as much of a, cultural drive as it is over in those parts of the world. But sometimes I remember watching a YouTube video where they were talking about Greek culture and about how dance is a huge thing for them, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'll just kind of look at that and just like, man, that looks like so much fun, and like and it's just so awesome seeing how those people can share that together, um, and it's something that um, that culturally I'm kind of jealous of sometimes because I think that's something that that's really special.
Yeah, you should go to Greece. Go to Greece. Go to an island. and they'll teach you.
Yeah, no, I
Or
should really.
You should take a
even
month.
conversely, you could just so Alex, I know that I when I first reached out to you, we kind of like, oh man, what's going on in your life and all this other stuff, and I told you I'm getting married next year, but my fiance is Italian, and her grandfather, his name is Mario. Like it doesn't get any more Italian than that,
That's great.
and her grandfather's Mario, and her grandmother Carol is Polish, and Anna is always telling me about we need to go up to Nebraska where my grandparents live, because there's this really interesting, like you said, I would have never thought that there's this like little Italy in Omaha that's really prominent. That and like this Polish kind of community that I would have never known was there, unless Anna had told me. And they go polka dancing every weekend. And Anna was like, we need to go and we need to go
So
polka
fun.
dancing. And I was like, as someone who has four left feet and the dancing sounds like the most terrifying thing I could possibly do. And it's hilarious because it's like me, the professional like singer, is terrified of dancing.
It's a weird
I think
thing, yeah.
I think that's my number one reason I've only been in like two music theater or like theater productions. I did one opera and one musical, and that's all I've ever done because I'm terrified of dancing. And so this idea of going polka dancing at the Polish home sounds terrifying, but it also sounds really fun. And so
Right.
it's interesting that you both have kind of identified with this whole um, cultural thing around expressing not only yourself and your music, but through dance as well, kind of adding that like fourth dimension. It's kind of like, wow, here's this all this other crazy information that we're taking in as individuals that means something to us in very different ways, and then we're going to dance to it as well, bam. And so that's very interesting. So uh, Anna will be very happy to know that you have all convinced me to go polka dancing finally after all these almost a decade. I've
A
finally been.
decade.
Yeah, we've been together for a long time.
Oh my god, you haven't gone polka dancing for a decade?
No, no. So
Yeah, you need to go polka dancing like this week. Like,
okay.
Right now.
and
Uh,
take me with you. I was just in Omaha like 2 days ago.
no kidding. Oh my
Literally two
gosh.
days. My
Well,
brother graduated med school.
next time you're in town, let me know, and we'll go to Nebraska. We'll go polka dancing.
Yeah, I'll go polka dancing too.
Okay. Yeah,
And we'll bring Jesse too.
I'd love to
Yeah,
crash
hey,
one of your.
I'm totally down.
I'd love to crash a Lebanese party. That sounds like fun. So let's do it.
Anytime.
I mean, the van camp's got nothing. We don't hug people. We don't dance.
Yeah.
We got. I'm kidding. I'm not a social misfit.
We've been doing 6 feet apart for my whole life. It was like this whole Corona thing.
It was built in. Yeah, the van camp side of my family, it's built in. It's like, don't touch me. But so we've talked a bit about your music theater, and I want to touch real fast on your film music because I know that's what you went to do your master's degree in. But then the kind of the big thing that I want to segue into, as we kind of enter our final like 20 minutes here on the show, is that you dropped an album, Dust and Ions. I love the album. I listened to it. I thought it was really interesting, and I'd like to get into that. But first, talk to us a little bit about your film music.
Yeah, totally. So I love film music. I really really enjoy working. I really enjoy working with directors on films. I think it's such an exciting, especially when you get like the right director who's thinking about their film in such a beautiful and profound way, and you get to be a part of that and really like I'm defining. Music is the subconscious of the film. You don't really notice. Sometimes, some moments you notice it, but you're really not supposed to notice it. And so it's the subconscious of the film, and the film, of course, is the director's like soul. So literally, my job is to define the soul, or the subconscious of this person's soul, which is kind of terrifying, but also
Yeah.
really exciting, right? Because you get to get into the depths of like and I always hang out with my directors too. Like I go to coffee, we go get drinks, whatever. I always hang out with my directors because you work with your friends, and I find it so much fun to work with people that you can get a drink with, and because you start to talk about what's going on in their hearts, what's going on in their souls, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff comes out in the film always. So,
Right.
so I've had a really fun time scoring a lot of films. I got to work with an amazing Lebanese director, Nate Tabara, and her film Frayed Roots that I scored last year. It got selected for the Rain Dance Film Festival, which is an Oscar qualifying film festival. I was very excited about
Wow.
that. And yeah,
Congratulations. That's huge.
thank you so much. And that was a cool one where I got to engage in like this balance of Middle Eastern music and Western music, and trying to find a balance because the character is trying to find a balance in herself. Of is she completely, she's kind of walking away from her Lebanese roots, pretty much. She's walking away from these roots, and so how do you score that in a way that's authentic and not contrived? It was very challenging,
Mm-hmm.
but really rewarding. So I love those kind of collaborations, and I'm also working on a Middle Eastern music album with a production music company, and so I'm currently talking to some Lebanese musicians, and it's going to be a really cool album. So it's the kind of thing I like to engage in a lot. I think it's something, part of my film music also sounds like very French, very impressionist, very classical. That exists. Also very, hybrid and whatever the current things are, all that. But also getting to engage with the culture is something I love doing, and I hope to continue doing that. And May is working on a new film now, which I will also be collaborating with her on. And so it's like a lot of fun things. But that kind of collaboration with somebody whose mind and soul is like, who's they're trying to accomplish something, I love it. I love film music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I mean, Jesse and I were literally talking before you came on the show. I said, Alex, his big thing that he's working on right now is film music. And Jesse was like, "Oh, I scored a film recently." So Jesse, talk to
Nice.
us a little bit about the film that you're working on.
Yeah, yeah, it was funny how this lined up because yeah, I scored my first film, really short film just recently, and even though it was a really, small short film, that kind of mindset, that kind of collaboration that Alex is talking about is something that, I encountered for the first time trying to, tap into what the director was trying to tap into.
Hmm.
And and the film was very touching because, it was about basically honoring workers who have been really essential during this pandemic, and basically interviewing them. And so being tasked to make something that kind of elevates that message was really, I really had to kind of just, uh, open myself up to really just kind of receive that message in a really meaningful way so that, I could write music that would fit well to it. So yeah, so that mindset where you're really having to tap into something with a director is really something that I totally experienced in that process. Even though it was just this really small film, it was still um, really powerful. So
Right.
yeah, but I totally understand that sentiment of really getting to the roots of
Yeah.
what a director is trying to portray and stuff like that.
Right. It's a fun process, and it's always different. I worked on a horror film a few weeks ago. I was working on like an intimate drama a few weeks before that, documentary. Like every single thing is completely different too.
Right.
That's the funny thing. It's like you kind of think you got to figure it out, but then you're dealing with a different soul. You're dealing with a different person, so so the process becomes wildly different. Are you doing an advertisement or this or that? So it is fun. That's great that you got to score that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you talk about that because some really excellent advice that I like. It wasn't directly given to me. I just happened to be in the room when this advice was given by Jake Runestad, who's a really prominent choral composer. He had an album with a fabulous ensemble out of Texas called Conspirare. Craig Hilla Johnson is their director. You might be familiar with them and their work. And it went up for a Grammy. It didn't win, not this past year, the year before that. It should have won. In my opinion, it was a fantastic album. It was a really powerful album. But I was in a master class and I just happened to be in the room while Jake was talking, and he said that one of the key things that I do in my composition process is that I want to get to know the director of this ensemble that I want to work with. So if I want to work with the Kansas City Chorale, then I'm going to go out and I'm going to take Charles Bruffy out for coffee and say, I want to get to know you better on an individual level before I
Oh
start
yeah,
talking to you about business and about music
so
and that
important.
kind of stuff. And I never really sat down and said that's something that's really important. I think I kind of knew it because I like to think I'm a personal individual, and then I can kind of talk with people like that. But it was really powerful for me to hear someone who's as massively successful as Jake is to say, hey, sit down with your director, whether that's the director of the ensemble, director of the film that you're working on, director of the opera that you're working on, whatever it is. Sit down with the director, sit down with the performers, get to know them on an individual level, and that's going to inform what you do. And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I did hear that similar advice from Jake in an interview that he did that I watched on YouTube, and it was the same kind of experience that, in the back of my head, I knew that was important, but once I heard him really articulate on that, it was something I think it made me more active in doing that. Because then after I heard someone else articulating on that again, with someone as successful as Jake is, I was like, man, this is really important. And so, I think it made me go out and do that more with the people I was writing music for. And it really helped because, it's really, interesting how once you know the director as a person like that, how much it influences what you write. And I think it makes it a more interesting process too, because it's not just about, making this product, but it's more about, creating something meaningful, which I think is a much more interesting and fulfilling process.
Yeah. I would always beat myself up in college. I was like, why don't I care so much about this like B flat? They're like the clarinetist is like, maybe can it be like a B natural? It's gonna be a lot more easier on my fingers. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like, sure. What or like I would never really care about those specific details. And I think it's good, right? It's that thing of like I accidentally discovered I was actually made for film music to an extent. In that, sometimes the directors say things like this piano sounds too pingy, and I'm like, okay, let me fix that. Or I don't like that note. I don't like C's. Don't put any C's in the score. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We're good.
Yeah.
You pick your battle. Sometimes you
Yeah.
have to get whatever. So, but yeah.
Or it's
That's
like
awesome.
changing the key of a piece or something like that. That's something I did recently. It was like, are you okay if we knock this piece up a tone? And I'm like, I do not care. Do
Yeah, all
whatever
the
you
time.
need to do.
Oh, I'll be playing. I'll be accompanying a vocalist, music theater vocalist, and they'll be like, "Actually, can we raise this up a step?" And I'm like, "Sure, why
Do
not?"
whatever you need to do.
like,
Yeah.
like on the spot transition, like in the middle of the rehearsal, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go up a step, and like that's normal on the piano.
Yeah.
It's like not even like you can transpose it. It's just
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
fun.
something I always, as a pianist, I always struggled with. If you gave me the music, I could learn the music. I could learn that music well. It's kind of like, hey, I don't like that. Can we change that? I'm like, no.
It's not natural. It shouldn't be a thing, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, hats off to you because I've spent years trying to figure out how to do that, and I've been unsuccessful thus far. And so, as just a really fast like bullet point to this film music, like what kind of equipment do you use? Do you have like a DAW that you prefer? Do you have a notation software that you use? Like we did an entire episode on notation softwares. You should go
Okay.
listen to it. It was really fun. But I'm just curious, real fast, before we give you the last 10 minutes to talk about Dust and Ions.
Sure. Let me look at my programs. It's great because once you kind of get to know your programs, it's like
Right.
they just are. They're just there. They're the things that you open. It's like, so I use Logic mostly as my DAW.
Okay.
I also love a good old piece of paper. Like I really enjoy sketching stuff on paper as well. So it
Great.
depends on the project, but Logic or paper. And then I use Dorico. I converted to Dorico because I mean it's
Yes.
yeah, it's
We're
like
the-
you're in
Yeah.
The Dora Bros have arrived.
yeah. Oh, I mean it's just like it makes so much sense. It's like you've been in an abusive relationship with Sibelius for 10 years, and then you
Oh
find
my
this
gosh.
new love interest. It's like, oh,
You're
Dorico.
gonna love our episode then,
Yeah.
because
I'm
I
excited.
spent 10 minutes just crapping all over Sibelius as someone who used Sibelius for years. It's kind of
Yes.
like, okay, here's what it does well. Now here's the 3 times long lists of what it does not do well. So
Yeah,
that's
it was a really-
fantastic.
It was a really natural topic for us because, this is old news to our audience, but yeah, Colby was a Sibelius user, but I was a Finale user who migrated to Dorico, and I was doing the same thing because after migrating to Dorico, it was like I will never ever go back to Finale ever again
Oh yeah.
because it's great how you describe it as an abusive relationship, because that's really what it was like.
It really
It
is.
was
That's very
really
accurate.
like, because the things that you just have to just do,
Yeah, the things it does to you. The things it does to you. It's like, why can't I just extend this like a half beat? Like you can't make a quarter note into a dotted quarter note easily. It's like you have to make it look like this and move the thing. It's insane.
It's stupid. Yeah.
Oh man, that's fantastic. So okay,
Awesome.
I'm glad that we were able to ask that question. It was a very pertinent question. It was screaming at me from my notes. I've been dying to figure out how to
Okay.
integrate into our conversation.
Yeah.
And then there it was. Great. So now let's talk about Dust and Ions. I want to first say that I know I mentioned this earlier, but I've listened to this album multiple times. I really loved it. I very much I don't speak French. I hate French. I hate singing in French. So pardon this pronunciation. But the Folie à Deux, I really I loved that particular keyboard work. I thought that was very beautiful. And I love how you kind of talked about how you have this Lebanese culture that informs how you write, but then also you love impressionist music. And after reading your biography, I was like, oh my gosh, Ravel. It makes so much more sense now. I was kind of like, where's this coming
Yeah.
from? It's so not Debussy, but it's like right almost and Ravel. There we go. So you answered
There it is.
that for me. So thank
Okay.
you. Um, so talk to us about your is it your first album?
That's my first album. I have
Very nice.
never. Yeah, it was my first like artist album, and I've done all sorts of other things, but like really focusing on the sound recording and making a beautiful recording. That was the first. Um, and it's this sort of. I think one of the keys to film music and really just being a composer is doing your artist projects. This is something I advocate for a lot, like when I'm talking with my friends and they're, because you have no control over what work you're actually doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is why you need the side hustles. Like, yeah. Uh, so this was my artist project. I think the beginning of 2020 already sucked for a few reasons. I mean, no, nothing ever sucked. I'm very thankful for everything, but I think there was a period in 2020 where like I got all these rejections that I thought were in the bag.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It always happens when you think you have it in the bag. When you don't think about it and you're like, I'm probably not going to get this.
Yeah, that's happened to me so many times, and I've always wondered what it is.
Right.
It's just when you think I've had a number of like big pieces that I was so excited about, and that seemed to be on lock, but then it was just like nope, and then you get the rug pulled out from underneath you. And I think COVID did that to all composers.
Oh
It
yeah.
was just
And this was before COVID too. This is before COVID.
Still, yeah. I think COVID did it to us on like this universal scale, but still, but it is still something we have to deal with.
It's something we were used to at least. We're like, oh, I've
Yeah,
experienced this.
Yeah, it's like it sucked, but it wasn't that bad because it's like this happened to us before.
Right. So after that, it was like February 2020. I was like, screw it. I just need to make my album. Like, I'm gonna write an artist album. It's gonna be so beautiful. I'm gonna record some live music. I had some funds from the 2019 production of American Beirut that I was gonna put towards this album. Whatever, everything was gonna be great. Pandemic hits. I'm not in New York. I go to Kansas. Like, I was gonna have a recording session. And I think my recording session was on like the day that the deaths in New York were like the highest out of the whole year, something like that. It was like one of those obvious, like, yeah, this definitely could not have happened more.
Yeah.
But I was in Kansas and I started to reconnect with something that I had neglected for a while, something that had fascinated me as a kid. I started to connect with the sky again, with the stars, there was a comet that came by, I think in June or something. I got some binoculars, I looked at it, it was amazing. And so there were all these like experiences with the stars. There was one moment I was sitting outside my parents' backyard, and I was just like looking at the sky, and then I realized, which I've heard before, that the sky is rotating. Although it's really we're rotating, it's not the sky. We're turning. So I just saw this like the Big Dipper, and then a few hours later I looked at it again, and it had moved, and it kept moving, and I really like experienced that.
Hmm.
which was insane. Anyways, all of that led me to this thematic, like, oh my god, like I need to make an album about the stars, right? And,
Hmm.
um, so that's why it's called Dust and Ions. It's on Spotify. It's on Amazon. You can buy CDs on Amazon. You can also call me and just buy a CD from me. All that stuff. So the great thing about that, about being in Kansas, is I also got to connect. I got to connect thematically with that, and I also got to connect with a lot of musicians in Kansas and a lot of Wichita Symphony musicians who actually hadn't had any work. I think my gig was a lot of their first gigs since COVID had started.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so it was a period of, so it was like May, June. I was writing a lot because there's a lot of emotions. Everybody's like, you're
Yeah.
connecting with things you hadn't connected with before, like this idea of a lot of time, of real boredom. It's not like you can go and get inundated with entertainment. Like you have to experience life. Anyways, so I started writing, and I started really wanting to write something that um, engages in all the different parts of my life, like kind of a reflection. So I had to do some jazz because I love jazz. Jazz is still a big part of my life. I did not do anything um, overtly Middle Eastern, but some of the like structural stuff I did has to do with that kind of music. But I did not. That was the one thing I didn't do because I wanted it to be more like cinematic. Um,
Hmm.
and then electronic music, but then really the string recording session was the highlight of the whole thing. I mean, there were other huge highlights, like Dr. Wayne Goins, K State came
Mm.
over and recorded. Um, he came over to the house in Wichita. We recorded for a day, and we had some Hennessy and played pool. Like it was amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, so the string recording was the really big big thing. So it was just getting everybody ready. It's something I'm used to, and I really enjoy producing and getting all these things together. So it was like a pandemic string recording. So there was distance, temperature checks,
Mm.
masks, all of that, in this cool little recording studio in Kansas. Um, and then mixing and like, all of that. I mean, it's a whole process. It's a whole process, but it was really fun. It was very fun creating it and getting to connect with this subject matter and these musicians and to get something that I'm really happy with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting that you talk about your connection with the sky, because I've said for years that if I was garbage at music, which thank the Lord I am not, but if I was garbage at music, I think I would have tried to have been an astronomer,
Oh,
because
cool.
I also have this connection with the sky. I actually wrote this in like 2018. I wrote this 22 minute choral work around this Icelandic poem that's all about the vastness of the universe and
Oh, that's
exploring the universe.
beautiful.
Um, it's never been heard before. I've have it's rather difficult music, so I've tried to find some people over the years to record it, and eventually I'll get someone to record it, and it'll be really fun. But I too have this connection with this guy, and I think that if Jesse didn't, that I've rubbed off on him in a little way, because we Jesse and I, since he's a really close friend of mine, which is why he's a co-host, and he comes out to Kansas, and I go out to South Carolina over the summers,
That's
um,
great.
and one of the things that I always look forward to, um, and for any of my teachers who are listening to this, this is a once a year kind of event. But Jesse and I will sit in my parents' pool because they live outside of Topeka. And there's a cornfield in my backyard. You can see the Big Dipper, you can see the Milky Way. And so we go out, we sit in the pool, we turn off the light, we smoke a cigar, and we just look at the sky and we talk about life. And it's the coolest thing.
That's great.
And I have a major connection with that. And I recently told somebody that I don't think I could ever live in a big city for an extended period of time because I couldn't see the sky, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
that'd be really bother me, because I need to have that connection that I've always had in Kansas.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was gonna say that when I get out there, we need to go stargazing again because
Yeah.
it was an experience that I really enjoyed. Because in South Carolina, you know, the unfortunate thing is that I live in the greater Columbia area, which is near the city, so the light pollution is awful. So a lot of times you just can't see. Um, but yeah, the great thing about unless you like live in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, which absolutely exists. But the great thing about going to Kansas, where there's just as Colby was saying, I was so fascinated by that there's just nothing, is that you can really get a good look. And it's really something that, I'm personally fascinated by, just all the little things that you see when you're looking up there. Um, and so, yeah, it is a experience that I really value, because especially in today's society of, we're surrounded by distractions. Just the opportunity to just focus on that, on just the stars in the sky for a long time, is really nice, because it kind of, because it's not only fascinating, but it allows you to just like clear your mind, and it gives you an opportunity to just really just focus on one thing, which uh you know is hard for me to do. So yeah, but I definitely kind of share that fascination, because it's always so cool when I get to do it.
Yeah. So as we wrap up our time here, I just want to first say, Alex, thanks for being on the show. You're the inaugural guest, and what a fantastic guest you have been. I've
Yeah.
loved getting to talk. And usually when Jesse and I talk, we have a fun time, and I look at the clock and an hour's gone by. It's like, oh my gosh! But
Yeah.
we had so many interesting things to talk about that I
Yeah.
feel like we've talked for 3 hours, and that's in a good way. That's in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you. I want to give you an opportunity to just plug your social media. If you have like an Instagram handle or Facebook, that kind of stuff, you want to check out his website, then Alex, take it away. I'll let you just spit all that
Sure.
information out there.
Yeah, sure. All my socials are at Music Wakim, Wakim as in Mary. So that's Instagram, Facebook, SoundCloud as well. I'm on Spotify, where you can find my album. My album's also on Amazon. You can buy a physical CD. And my website is alexwakim.com, and I'm always updating it. And my Instagram, I'm probably most active on. But yeah, keep in touch, because I'm always trying to post new things and trying to connect with other creatives and people, music appreciators, and whatnot. So, yeah.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And for all of our listeners, here's our obligatory plug for all of our social media. If you'd like to reach out to us via email, which is something that we do encourage you to do, that would be podcast.musicallyinclined@gmail.com, our Instagram, and we now have a Facebook. So if you'd like to find us on Instagram and Facebook, you can do that. That is at Musically Inclined PC. One more time, that is at Musically Inclined PC. And yeah, we would just love to connect with you. My personal Instagram handle is KG Van Camp, and Jesse's is at jessykaiser.jpg. So a little bit of fun in there for you. So yeah, I think with that, that's where we're gonna wrap it up for today. Go listen to Alex's music. Go buy his album, Dust and Ion. Support a fantastic composer and the work that he is doing. Alex, thanks again for being on the show. It's been a blast to have you on. In the future, at some point, we will have to do it again, and we can break down some more of the fascinating projects that you are working on. So without further ado, my name is Kolby Van Camp,
And my name is Jesse Kaiser.
and you have been listening to Musically Inclined.